Welcome back to Podjunction Podcast. I'm Sadaf, Beynon, and with me is the Matt Edmundson.
The Matt Edmundson.
The Matt Edmundson.
The OG.
The OG. The GOAT.
The greatest of all time is what she meant, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to clarify. Or did you?
Yes, that's it.
Am I
That's the
actually
one.
genuinely a goat?
Anyway, back to Podjunction. This is a show where podcasters learn how to grow their business using a podcast. And in this particular episode, we've got Mark Asquith back. He is the founder of Captivate.fm. And in the segment, he's talking about using podcasting as a business tool, and that it's no, quick or shortcut to riches, but it is a powerful medium if you're willing to put the time into it. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
Fantastic. And he'll know because, they're a podcast hosting platform. He gets to see the stats and all the data from gazillions of podcasts, I would have thought. Mm-hmm. And so that will be interesting insight, which will come from Mark. I'm looking forward to this. I'm very much looking forward to this. So shall we jump straight into it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Here's the clip.
When did you first see the potential for podcasting as a business tool for yourself?
I think straight away, really. It's like anything. It's only got potential if you actually put time and effort into it. It's like anything. It isn't a get-rich-quick thing. It's not the secret ingredient. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the thing that's going to supercharge your business and 10x your revenue. All that rubbish you see in the books. It's not that. So I saw the potential for it as a channel really early, but the problem was not that many people were listening. And now there are so many more people listening. So it was, I spotted it early, but I was also very aware that it needed heck of a lot of good work and consistency, which I think back then, a lot of people had spotted it as a potential channel, but they thought it was this get rich quick thing, which was that's a shame, because that's just not right.
Yeah. So how would you say then, based on what you've just said, would you the perception of podcasting as a marketing tool? How do you think that's changed among businesses since the industry first started? So you're saying they used it as a get rich quick tool, or they tried to. But where things are at now, how do you think that perception's changed for businesses?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to categorize businesses. Those people that I'm talking about that were using it as get rich quick were the quote unquote entrepreneurs.
Right.
And what I mean there is online marketers that would build traffic to a website and sell advertisements, sell affiliate products. Nothing wrong with that, but let's not confuse that with an entrepreneur, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
They're the genuine entrepreneurs in my mind. The reason that I say that is because I think it's important to understand that actually what we're talking about is a genuine small business, that is actually to this day, and even in 2024, as we're sat here, that are still seeing podcasting as bleeding edge. Many small businesses now are still seeing podcasting as bleeding edge, but they're now able to get into it a little bit more. And I think that's what's changed is this idea that podcasting is an entertainment and education medium. It is. It's like any other channel. It's like TV. It's like broadcast media. It's like YouTube. It's like writing, anything, whether it's a blog or a book. It's like any other channel. You've got to entertain or educate or a little mix of both. And I think when people understood that and when people figured that out and actually realized that you've got to provide content that will help to position you as the expert, because that's ultimately what the businesses in the space are looking to do. But it's got to be educational and it's got to be useful and importantly, it's got to be entertaining. And I think that's been the big shift is that, even some of the biggest interview podcasts that had the same format because it was cool to batch record and you could just record the same old stuff and just put it out all the time. They can't do that anymore. They're not doing that anymore because there are other better shows out there that will deliver much of the same value, but in just a better way. And I honestly think that's the tipping point, or has been the tipping point the last 4 or 5 years, is that people have seen that this is a genuine media that requires the same attention as anything that you put your effort into. And it's not just get a mic, run an interview, sell some affiliate stuff, make $100,000 a month. It's just it just isn't that way. So I think that's been the big change.
Yeah. So do you think this shift has come from, trying to figure it out and realize their get-rich-quick schemes weren't working. And so is it a part of that, or is it to do with society as well? Like, is it the way they're absorbing content? Has that changed? Do you know what I mean? Is it a?
I do.
Is it a myth? Yeah,
I do. I think it's both. Yeah, I think if we take the consumer angle first, podcast listening has grown and grown and grown. It's now in the lexicon. It's now mainstream. And what that has caused is more bigger media companies. You know, we were purchased by Global. We one of our podcasts that launched 14 months ago is just about to hit 100 million downloads aggregate.
Oh wow! Yeah,
it's a huge show, and we've got a lot of those shows, and the general podcast listener has got so much more choice of high quality talent coming into the space and creating great shows. So that's the first thing. The targeted listener, the business owner that might be listening to Podjunction, actually has got so many other shows to choose from. You know, we want them to choose Podjunction, but they could choose other shows, whereas before they couldn't. So I think that's one element of it, is that the listener is much more savvy. They're aware that it's not just for the nerds and it's not just for education and the gurus. And then I think you're right. On the other side of that coin, you know, a lot of people started podcasts having bought a podcasting course from someone whose entrepreneurial vision was to sell podcasting courses. Like, they weren't making money from their podcast. They were making money because they were teaching people how to podcast. And then they built an audience, sold sponsorships. And that's cool. But a lot of gurus back then, what they were doing is saying they were entrepreneurs and business people and trying to teach business, when actually they were just podcasters. And that's great. There were podcasters that were making money from sponsorships. But not every podcaster can do that. And not every podcaster can monetize an audience on the back end. So a lot of these people bought these courses, or they bought the things from the gurus, realized it's really not as rosy as it was painted, and decided that actually, do you know what? I'm either going to quit, and a lot did, or I love talking and I love sharing my message, but I'm actually going to reevaluate my mission with my podcast, or I'm going to reevaluate the type of effort that I put into my podcast in order to get the results. So yeah, I do think there's been a couple of big tectonic shifts that have caused that change in behavior.
If that got you curious and you want to catch the full episode, be sure to subscribe to the show. We've got plenty more great conversations coming up.
Welcome back. Love that.
It's good, right?
Yeah, I can't wait till the full interview comes out. I'm not going to lie. If you are a regular to the show, you will know that we release the full interview with all of our guests. So, you know, your conversation with Mark was about 40 minutes, I think. And you can hear that whole interview next week.
Yes. I'm just trying to think. Yeah. So this will go out. No, sorry. You'll hear it on Friday this week.
Oh, the same this very week.
Yeah.
Not next. Okay, very good. So do listen to the whole interview, because Mark's got a lot of experience in this industry. And yeah, I loved how he talked about that. You know, some of the changes that have happened, we've seen them as well. I've not had a podcast with 100 million downloads yet. Maybe close, don't know. In my dreams, maybe. But it's...
You wouldn't know, because we don't look at that data anyway.
we just don't care. But no, it's really interesting talking about, you know, the changes, the step ups, what's happened, the so-called gurus, of which there are, you know, there are a lot out there. Originally, we were going to sell a podcast course. As he was talking, I was laughing to myself, because we thought originally, well, we could take all our knowledge we know about podcasting and sell it as a podcasting course. We even outlined it, and I started to script it. We could record that. I could probably record that course tomorrow. So it made me laugh when he was talking about that.
But the difference is you had a podcast. So
the difference is I had a podcast, and I was already in business.
Yes.
And my business wasn't making money from selling podcasting courses to unsuspecting podcasters.
Yes.
So we did have integrity in what we were doing. But then we thought, no, let's do a podcast instead. And it's
a lot more fun.
It's a lot more fun. Yeah. So this is sort of instead of that course, really. But it's fascinating, isn't it? And just the thing that stood out to me here is expectations in terms of what is it you're expecting when you start a podcast, and can you manage those? So when we, for those of you who don't know, we have a business which helps people set up podcasts. So we don't do it as a course. We use this podcast, and we actually have an agency, don't we? We have a service where we help business leaders sort of get set up with their own podcast, use our methodology to go and, in effect, build their network, connect with people, use the interview style podcast to open doors to grow their business. And we've done that. And, I've not got 100 million downloads, but we've got stories of making hundreds and thousands of pounds as a result of doing what we've done, right? So this is kind of what we do. And one of the things that we do in that service is I think you have to manage the expectations of people when they start a podcast, because it is always this case of, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to go get 100 million. I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan. That's what I'm going to be. Or I'm going to be Jordan Peterson, or whoever your, person of choice is in terms of who you listen to. Be like, I'm going to go get thousands of downloads, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. And the reality of life is often
very different.
Very different. You might get 5 people downloading it, then 10, and it might grow to about 150 to 200 people over a few months, unless you start putting money behind it to grow it. But we're talking about organic growth because of another reason that Mark said. There is so much more choice now, and it's becoming more and more competitive. I still think out of all the media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's probably the least competitive one for a number of reasons. But it is getting more and more competitive, and he is right, and people have more and more choice. And so if your desire to build a podcast purely because of the audience and go and get sponsorship, I think it's still doable, but I think it's a much harder road to go down. And way back in the early days of Podjunction, we talked to Chloe Thomas about this.
Okay, remind me.
So Chloe runs an e-commerce podcast like myself called E-commerce Masterclass.
She's got a few, doesn't she? That's one of them, Yeah. And love Chloe. She's an absolute legend. But her business model was very much, I'm going to do this e-commerce podcast and I'm going to go and get sponsorship. And one of the things that Chloe talked about in the episode, and she's been quite open about it, is actually over recent years, especially since COVID, it has become more and more difficult to get the sponsors. Whether that's still true or not, I don't know. We'll have to find out. But we'll have to get Chloe back on the show. We saw her at the podcast show. We did, yeah.
Yeah, it was nice to catch up with her. I think it's something you can do, but just eyes wide open, I think, is probably it. Building 100 million downloads is not as straightforward as maybe some people writing books would let you know.
Yeah. I'm trying to recall who it was I had the conversation with, and it was in one of the segments that we showed on Podjunction here. But it was he was talking about someone he was who knew was a podcaster and hadn't had any success from it. From
Stephen
a business,
Pemberton.
Is that who it was? Yeah. And so his buddy just
quit.
Yeah, he quit and he walked away from it. And I think that's something Mark was talking about now, that you do have to put in the time and the work in order to make your podcast a success. It's not going to be overnight. Yeah. But to your point about like the listeners having more choice, I think part of that choice is based on the quality of the podcast. So it's not just the content that they're getting from it, it's also the quality of it, and they're more sophisticated, and they want like you say, you go through it on a Friday, you take out the ones that don't really catch your interest.
Absolutely. I think that element of especially if you're going down the build the audience route, where you need those audience numbers, you do have to do what we don't do, which is focus on the data, and you have to look at the numbers and see what's working. Look at the titles. I would even go as far as to say you should probably do things like put money behind Facebook ads to test podcast titles. So I'm going to title this show, I've got 3 different options. I'm going to put $20 behind it, run them as Facebook ads, and see which title pulls the most, so that's the title I then use for the podcast. I would start using some of those strategies, because getting people to actually listen to your podcast is... you've got to get them to download it, and 2, as we've talked about on the show, you've then got to get them to listen to it. And that's all done on the basis of the title, I think. Yeah. And so testing that title and see which pulls, I think they're the kind of things that I would be doing, putting paid media behind getting people to listen to it and subscribe to the show, because you really, really need to do that. And there are companies that can help you with that. But I think if you're going down that road, the biggest thing you've got to be aware of is there are other options. And it's not just like I do a leadership podcast. There are other podcasts about leadership. but they may go, I don't want to listen to a leadership podcast. I want to listen to a podcast about football, or I want to listen to a podcast about cooking, or it's not just there's competition in your niche now. There's such vast array of competition to grab their attention. There's only one car journey. There's only one dog walk. There's only, that 20, 30 minutes that people get to listen to your show. And giving them a reason for yours is quite important, I think. Because you're competing in your niche, but across the spectrum. So, I mentioned before, I listened, say, to Carey Nieuwhof's podcast. Well, his podcast has not only got to compete with other podcasts in that leadership space that I listen to, but also the football podcast that I listen to. The Rest is Football with Lineker and Shearer and Micah Richards, which I just think is hysterical. But it's that kind of, when I'm driving home and I'm listening to a podcast, what mood am I in right now?
Yeah.
And so there are things like that you do have to think about and be aware of. And so this is where I think old school e-commerce thinking comes into play.
Okay.
Because in e-commerce, if you don't know, dear listener, and why would you if you're new to, by the way, if you are new to the show, welcome. Very warm welcome to you. But I run an e-commerce, we all run an e-commerce business. We're all involved. It's not me on my own. There is a big team, which is wonderful. But we have an e-commerce business. And with e-commerce, the thing I like about e-commerce is, one, it's digital, like podcasts, it's a digital product. But so it may be a physical product, but people buy it digitally, right? So it's all digital interaction. There's two things I need to think about as an e-commerce entrepreneur. Number one, how I get new customers. Number two, how I keep those customers coming back and buying from me time and time again. So I need to build repeatability into the whole thing. So get the new customer and get them to buy more and more. And the thing we become obsessed with in e-commerce is something called customer lifetime value, right? CLV. And so in podcasting terms, I've got to get somebody to listen. I've got to get that download, someone to listen to the first show. But how do I get them to listen to the show over and over again, especially if it's a big audience thing?
Yeah.
What's working in that sphere? How do I keep them engaged? And I think these days it has to be more than just a podcast, if that makes sense. I think you offer things like the newsletter, which I know you started doing with Podjunction stuff. Which is great, by the way. If you're not subscribed to Sadaf's podcast newsletter, then do subscribe to it, because it just brings value that's outside of this show, but in a way that people consume media, right? So people consume on podcast format, they consume in email format. So there's all these different ways. Social media is going to be a big one. The shorts, all those kind of things, which we don't do loads with on Podjunction. I think it's a time issue. We got to know what you need to know what you do well. But again, if you're building that whole audience, you have to think about a much bigger picture and how you engage people at all these different touch points to keep them coming back time and time again. That repeat purchase rate, for want of a better expression. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a bit of a tall order. It's not that it's impossible, but again, going back to what Mark said, you've got to be willing to put the time in.
Yeah.
Because you have to think about things across all these channels. And this is where I think, I was listening to Seth Godin talk about AI today on the way in, because I'd listened to a podcast on the way to work, because, why would I not? And I was listening to Seth Godin talk about AI and how he thinks going forward there's two big change agents that are happening now that will have a massive impact on the future. He just can't predict how much of an impact or what that impact is going to look like. And he said the first one was climate change, and the second one was AI.
Okay.
And so AI, I think, is one of those things in podcasting that we've all gone, AI can help me. It can write the blog post, it can do this, it can do that. And yes, it can, but to quote Seth, it's all a bit grey gobbledygook. Do you know what I mean? And if you just want to put grey gobbledygook out there, then great, do that. But if you want to put something out there that's going to influence, something that's of value, something that's of note, in his opinion, you can't use AI. You can use AI for ideas. You can use AI to, and he gave some specifics on how he uses AI to help him. But it's like, I write every single word because, and he said, I don't even have to write a lot. It has to be unique. And I think whilst AI has helped many of us, what it has done, and this again, I think how you stand out in your podcast, is it's created a lot of mediocre content,
Yeah.
which is just grey beige nonsense that just all sort of merges into one because everyone just throws AI out there. And I don't think long term that's a way to stand out and be different.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is like when you're using AI repeatedly to do stuff for you, you stop thinking.
Yes.
And so it's harder then to come up with your own content because you're just like, I'll just get AI to do it. And that mediocre content is then becomes good enough for you, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah. And I think AI is very good at brainstorming. I think you can,
there's ways to use it.
There's ways to use it. So you can give it a list of ideas and it'll go away and bring you more ideas. And actually some of those will be really great. It can critique really well. But I think what I would suggest that we don't do is outsource creativity to AI.
Yeah.
Because I think to be a good podcaster, fundamentally, you have to be creative. You have to be creative with your... I don't think you have to be a creative, which was a buzz term many years ago. But I do think you have to be creative. You have to hone your craft. You have to learn how to ask really good questions. You have to learn how to think on the spot. You have to learn how to do all of these things. And if you're just so busy outsourcing to AI, these are the sort of soft skills that I think you lose along the way. And I think that comes through in the podcast. Again, this is one of the ways I think you stand out. If you're mediocre and using AI, it's just going to blend. And fundamentally, if that's what you're doing, the question is, why would, in 2 years' time, we don't need you because AI will do your whole podcast for me.
Yeah.
It really will. It will host it. It will speak it. It will do everything. And I've not done a dang thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so why do I need to be around? But it's that creative flair. It's that banter. It's that, like this show, AI couldn't do this show. It would have proper mic technique. Would be
and had that going for it. But Mark talked about that, didn't he? The value of educating your listener and also entertaining them.
Yeah,
those two things.
Yeah, education and entertainment, I think, are two very good things to do. And AI helps with education. Does it help with entertainment? You can tell it. It was interesting listening to Seth Godin talk about how, and I've actually done this on AI, which made me smile, is he said, I would go to Claude and I would ask Claude to give me the answer like Seth Godin.
That's funny.
Which I thought was really funny. Obviously, Seth Godin's a very well-known published author, so it's got a lot of content to go, this is how Seth was right. And actually, in the past, I've told Claude to answer questions in the style of Seth Godin because it just causes it to think a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, that made me smile. But
funny.
Yeah. I should probably ask this. Could you answer this question in the style of Matt Edmundson? He'd be like, no.
No, you should try it. Yeah. I'll try it.
That's right. Claude would be like, there's no way I want to do that. Why would I want to do this? Yeah, who's that guy? Such a loser. There's so many more better people on the planet to imitate than Matt Edmundson. But yeah, I think that education, entertainment, such good things. How do you combine the two?
Yeah.
And this is what makes great teachers great, right? So one of our lodges, she's a teacher, newly qualified, wants to educate. But I think what makes a great teacher is their ability to entertain, not necessarily dress up in stupid hats, but make the educational information fun to learn.
Yeah.
And you do that with entertainment. There's compassion. There's all those kind of things that teachers need as qualities. But the ability to communicate a message in such a way that people remember it and learn it, I think is what actually entertainment is about. It's not about telling jokes, and it's not about, being Ant and Dec or whatever you perceive entertainment to be. But to do it in a way which entertains us, which keeps us engaged, I think is probably a better way to put it. And doing that, I think, is just super, super helpful. Yeah, super helpful. So yeah. Definitely. How do you tell dad jokes? That's my theory. We should start doing that, shouldn't we? The start of Podjunction. And today's dad joke. My kids just roll my eyes now when I tell dad jokes. And we have a sign in our kitchen which says "Dad jokes told here." I put it up on the wall. And so whenever they roll their eyes, I just point at the sign and I just go, listen, it's written in the Constitution of this house. They don't like it. They tried to, last year when we took the sign down to put Christmas decorations up, they hid the sign. They're like, it was an accident, Dad. It got stuck under a cushion somewhere. It took us months and then after a few months, someone went, what's this? And all the kids were like, no.
That's funny. That's very funny. I remember doing that with the family photo Mum had up on the wall. And it came down for Christmas. And we hid it under the couch.
Where's that photo gone? That's not how your mum talked, I'm sure. But
no, it wasn't at all.
My best impression. Oh, dearie. So, yes. Anything else?
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah, I think we have. So, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, make sure you like and subscribe. And do listen out for the whole episode with Mr. Mark, because that's going to be out in just a few days' time from the point, well, not from the point of recording, but from the point of release of this. It's going to be out in a few days' time. You're definitely going to want to check that out. Who's our next guest? Do we know?
Jason Greenwood.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. So you spoke with him on
Jason.
podcast.
He's such a legend. I really like Jason. He's such a great. We've been chatting on LinkedIn.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. We put speaking of the episode that we did with Jason Greenwood, I put a video on LinkedIn, just like a little snippet of him talking about, what were we talking about? B2B e-commerce, which I appreciate for 99.9% of you listening to this show. You're just like, what? I'm out, right? But we were talking about B2B e-commerce, and he was talking about changes that Nike had made in this video. And it's great, that video, we put it on LinkedIn. I don't know how many people have viewed it. There was an awful lot of comments going back and forth and people asking. And I was like, Jason, you should probably answer this question. And so, we've been going back and forth a little bit, which is great. He's such a legend, that guy. So I'm looking forward to the one with Jason. I'm going to share, though, talking about LinkedIn, because I've just reminded. Yeah. So we've had Peter on this show, right? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, we have. Peter Murphy-Lewis.
Yeah, because I know he's... I just forget which shows people have been on. So Peter came on the e-commerce podcast. He shared his wisdom on here. He wrote this the other day on LinkedIn. He said, I started hopping on podcasts, not because I'm some marketing genius. I'm just going to put in here parentheses. Oh, but you are, Peter. But because I had a story to tell, which we all do, right? And this is very true. And so this is his podcasting journey. And he said, even the biggest names out there struggle with imposter syndrome, thinking, do I really have anything important to share? Trust me, you do. So how'd it go? He said, I spent 30 minutes on a podcast and my message hit 1,000 plus listeners, which turned into 10 qualified leads. No fancy marketing funnel, no massive ad spend, one conversation. And that voice kept echoing long after I left the mic. And the best part, it scales. That one episode, it's become a blog, a video, and maybe even a lead magnet. And he goes on to say, I got 1,594 shares of my podcast with Matt Edmundson. So this is the e-commerce podcast that we did, and he sent me a photo, 1,594 shares, where we talked about decoding the customer journey through research. And that's a big deal, I think.
That is.
And so it's great to hear from Peter on that. So this is somebody who came onto my show and has had success as a result of coming onto my show. Now, he does a lot. He takes that content, he creates a blog post, he shares it out on LinkedIn, he shares it out on Twitter. He's creating his own blog, but we do a blog post, but he's creating his own. He creates his own video snippets for LinkedIn and Facebook ads. He creates custom landing pages. And obviously he sort of has this whole process where he goes onto the podcast, gives him content, and he gets it out there.
Yeah.
But again, this is just an example of someone. I just thought I'd share it because we're talking about LinkedIn. But also, he's been on this show. But here's his strategy for being a guest on a podcast. And he's putting in the work.
Yeah.
And so it's not like he came on. I can't tell you that everybody that's been on EP has had 1,600 shares of their podcast, where people have actually shared it out. And he's got all the clicks and all that sort of stuff back to his website and all the leads. That's not everybody's story that comes on the show. But he's put in the work afterwards, and he's got that.
Yeah.
And I'm really stoked for him. So
for sure.
Really, really pleased. And thanks, Peter, for sharing that. And I hope you don't mind me sharing the story. Make sure you follow him on LinkedIn if you haven't done so already. But yeah, put in the work. So I think that's it from us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So do come follow us on LinkedIn. Whilst you're on LinkedIn, I'm at Matt Edmundson. You are?
Sadaf Beynon.
And on Instagram.
Yes, an easy one. I am Sadaf Beynon.
And I'm still Edmundson. And so do come connect with us. Love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know about your podcast if you have a podcast. We would genuinely love to hear from you. And if you think you would be an interesting guest on the Podjunction podcast, do let us know. Again, we'd love to hear from you. You can just go to podjunction.com. I think there's an apply thing on there.
/apply.
/apply. And just fill out that form on there. I think the form basically asks you for everything, including, when was the last time you sold your kidney and all that sort of stuff.
No. You don't need to pull out your medical records to complete the form.
I think you might do. So anyway, just go there, fill out that form. We would genuinely love to hear from you if you've got something you'd want to share about how you do podcasting and how you've used it to help grow your business. Everybody that's been a guest on this show has come from our own network so far.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And people that we've connected with over the years, so which is amazing. But yeah, genuinely, we do want to talk to interesting people. And so to quote Peter, everyone suffers from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And so if you think you've got something to share, well, even if you don't think you've got something to share, you probably have. If you've been doing podcasting for a little while and you've used it to grow your business, we definitely would love to talk to you about that. So do head over to the website and let us know who you are. That'd be great. Podjunction.com/apply. It's like we practiced that. We genuinely didn't, by the way. But no, anything else from you in closing?
No.
Awesome. That's it from me. That's it from Sadaf. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode at Podjunction. If you've enjoyed the insights from this episode and want to hear the full conversation with today's special guest, don't forget to visit podjunction.com, where you'll find more information about how you can join Podjunction cohort. Whether you listened while on the go or in a quiet moment, thank you for letting us be a part of your day. Remember, every episode is a chance to gain insights and to transform your business with podcasting. So keep on tuning in, keep on learning, and until next time, happy podcasting.